I never thought I'd live to see the day. I felt like a stranger in my own home. After 78 years of life raising children, baking pies for the church bake sale, watching my grandchildren take their first steps, I thought I'd earned a little peace. I've always believed in family, above all else. My home has been a place of warmth, laughter, and stories. The old floors have heard the pitter-patter of tiny feet and the cries of newborns. My kitchen, though small, has fed dozens of guests over holidays and Sunday dinners, and I've always kept my door and my heart open to my children. But nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered one ordinary Tuesday morning. It started with a sound, a strange clicking noise in the living room. I was dusting off the photo shelf, just rearranging a few old frames, when I noticed something new, a tiny black dot tucked behind the floral vase on the mantel. At first, I thought maybe it was just a loose screw or a smudge on the wall, but as I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was a lens, a camera, one I had never seen before. My mind raced. I'm no fool. I've seen enough crime dramas to recognize a surveillance camera when I see one, but in my home, without my knowledge, that was the beginning of a journey I never wanted to take. As I looked closer, I found another hidden near the bookshelf, and another peeking out from behind the television. My heart was pounding. Who would do such a thing? I hadn't hired anyone to install these. I hadn't even let a handyman into my house in months. That's when I remembered a conversation from weeks prior. My son Mark had been talking about smart home upgrades. He said it would be good for my safety. "You never know, Mom," he said. "What if you fall and no one's around?" At the time, I thought he was just being considerate. It didn't feel considerate anymore. I sat down on my armchair and tried to calm myself. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was all just a misunderstanding. Maybe I forgot. But I knew, deep down, never forget things like this. My memory may not be what it used to be, but I know what goes on in my own home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept looking at the walls, wondering what else had been hidden. Was someone watching me now? When I ate dinner in my nightgown, when I talked to myself while brushing my hair, the thought made me feel sick. I wasn't just angry. I was violated. I didn't confront Mark right away. I needed proof. So the next day, I called my friend Sally. Her grandson is a computer tech. He came by that afternoon and confirmed everything. There were 5 cameras, all connected to a remote access account. And guess who the account belonged to? Mark. I sat there in silence, my hands trembling in my lap. The boy I raised, the baby I swaddled in a blue blanket at St. Joseph's Hospital, had put cameras in my house without so much as a warning. Why? What did he want? To watch me cook dinner? Read books? Or was it worse? Did he think I couldn't be trusted? Did he think I'd lost my mind? I felt betrayed in a way I never had before. My husband, God rest his soul, had his faults, but even he never made me feel so small, so monitored, like a prisoner in her own home. The worst part, I wanted to believe he did it out of love, out of fear for my safety. But deep down, a mother knows there was more to it. This is my story, not just about hidden cameras, but about what happens when the people you trust the most cross a line you never thought they would. When privacy becomes control, when care becomes surveillance. I never imagined I'd have to fight for my dignity at this age. But if this happened to me, it could happen to any grandmother, any parent, any person who just wanted to age with grace and peace. So here it is, the truth, from the beginning. How I found out, what I did next, and how I learned that love without respect isn't love at all. I still remember the moment I held Mark in my arms for the first time. He was my second child, but something about him, those big brown eyes, the way he clutched my finger without letting go, made me feel like I was holding a piece of my heart outside of my body. From the very beginning, Mark was different, sensitive, quiet, observant. While his older brother was always running around causing mischief, Mark would sit by my side, coloring or helping me sort green beans for dinner. He was my golden boy, not just because he behaved so well, but because of the way he looked at me, with trust, with admiration, like I was the center of his world, and in many ways, he was the center of mine. When he fell off his bike at age 6 and scraped his chin, I was the one he called for. When he got nervous before his first school play, it was my hand he squeezed behind the curtain. And when he got accepted into university, the first in our family to go, he cried in my arms. There was pride in every step he took. Even when he became a grown man with his own mortgage, job, and kids, he'd still call me, just to say hi. "Hey Ma, you good?" he'd ask. "Need me to pick up anything? Want me to swing by?" I always said no, I didn't want to be a burden, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't love those moments. The truth is, he made me feel needed. That's a rare thing when you're old. After his father passed, our bond grew even stronger. He became the man of the house in his own way, always making sure I was okay. He helped with my bills, shoveled my driveway in the winter, set up my new television when the old one stopped working. I was so proud of the man he had become, responsible, caring, thoughtful. So when he started talking about helping me modernize, I didn't question it. I thought, that's just Mark looking out for me again. He talked about smart lights, motion sensors, alarms, things I barely understood, but I trusted him, because that's what you do when someone has loved you so well for so long. You believe they'll always have your best interest at heart. If you'd asked me then whether I trusted Mark with my life, I wouldn't have hesitated. He was my golden boy, the one who used to tuck my blanket around my feet when I fell asleep in my chair, the one who still brought me flowers on Mother's Day, the one who always made sure my porch light was on before he left. I never imagined he'd become the one to make me feel unsafe, unseen, watched. That's the thing about betrayal. Never comes from strangers. It comes from those you hold closest, and because you've loved them so deeply, the pain carves out a place just as deep. That's how much I trusted him, and that's why what he did hurt more than anything I could have imagined. It was a Tuesday, nothing extraordinary, the kind of day where you wake up, stretch a little longer than usual, and make your coffee just the way you like it, to sugars, splash of milk, and a bit of cinnamon if I'm feeling fancy. That morning, I was in my slippers, robe on, hair pinned up the way I always do. The sun had spilled through the kitchen window, hitting my old porcelain sugar jar and casting a warm light across the counter. It should have been a peaceful morning. It should have been just like any other. But something was off. I remember reaching for the dish towel I keep folded next to the stove when I heard a faint clicking sound from the living room. It wasn't loud, just a quick, mechanical flick. It was the kind of sound you might miss entirely if you weren't paying attention. But for some reason, that day, I did notice. I froze at first. I thought maybe it was the radiator kicking in, or perhaps the clock behind the couch, it ticks. Sometimes when the batteries get low. I brushed it off, finished drying the mug, and walked into the living room to tidy up. I always tidy in the morning. A habit, I guess. I straighten pillows, fold the throw blankets, check the windows. I like things just so. But then, I saw it, atop the fireplace mantel, nestled behind the old floral vase that's been there for years, an odd black dot, about the size of a marble. I leaned in, peering closer. It wasn't part of the vase, and it certainly wasn't there last week. I touched it, gently at first, and felt the cool metal and plastic shell. And that's when it hit me. It was a camera. My heart started to race. I've lived through a lot. Wars, recessions, even buried a husband, but nothing prepared me for the feeling of being watched in my own home. My first thought was, am I being paranoid? But the second thought came louder. No, this is real. And once you see one, you start looking for more. I found the second camera near the bookshelf, tucked behind an old ceramic angel my granddaughter made in Sunday school. The third was a boff, the TV mounted high and cleverly disguised behind a curtain. Valence. I felt a cold sweat rise on my back. I hadn't asked for this. I hadn't agreed to it. I sat down on the couch, trying to process. I could hear my pulse thumping in my ears. I wasn't sure whether I was scared, angry, or just deeply confused. And then I remembered a conversation from about a month earlier. My son Mark had come over. He does that sometimes. Brings groceries, chats about his work. That time, though, he mentioned something strange. You ever think about putting some smart devices in the house, Mom? Just for safety, he said. What if you fall when you're alone? At the time, I smiled. That's sweet, honey, but I'm not ready for all that technobabble. I thought we had dropped the subject. Apparently not. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It unfolded in waves. First came the disbelief, then the sense of violation, then the questions. How long had they been there? What had they seen? Was this just about safety, or something else entirely? I called my friend Sally. She lives a few streets over and still drives. I told her everything, my voice shaking. She came over with her grandson Tyler. He's in college for computers. I didn't even know what I was asking for, but I needed help. Tyler brought a small tablet, plugged something into the wall, and within minutes, he had answers. Yep, he said, squinting at the screen. 5 cameras total, they're all feeding into a cloud account. Looks like it's registered under ... Mark. There it was. Cold, unmistakable. My son had installed surveillance cameras in my home, connected to his own devices. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat there, numb. Tyler showed me how to disconnect them. He even helped me unscrew them from the walls. But it wasn't about the plastic and wires anymore. It was about trust, about the feeling of safety I had lost. That night, I sat in the kitchen with the lights off. I didn't want to be seen, even though the cameras were gone. I kept replaying every moment of the last few weeks. Every phone call, every visit from Mark. Had he been watching me this whole time, listening, observing me make my tea, read my paper, talk to myself while pruning plants? I felt humiliated, but I also felt something else resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. I thought of other women my age, other mothers and grandmothers who might be going through the same thing, but didn't know how to name it, who might think they were just being paranoid, or worse, who felt too ashamed to say anything. Well, I wasn't going to be ashamed. Mark crossed a line, and I had every right to draw a boundary. I decided right then and there, I would confront him, but not with yelling, not with accusations, with truth, with calm, unshakable truth. And if he couldn't see what he had done, if he couldn't understand why this broke my heart, then I would at least make sure I stood my ground, because no one deserves to feel like a prisoner in their own home. It took me nearly a week to gather the courage to confront Mark. Each day I'd walk past one of those little black eyes staring at me from the corners of my home, and the pit in my stomach would grow. It wasn't just the fact that he had installed the cameras without my consent, it was the betrayal, the secrecy, the implication that I couldn't be trusted to live alone, to make my own decisions, to maintain my independence. But most of all, it was the silence that echoed loudest. Mark had always been my golden boy. He was my firstborn, the one I read bedtime stories to when his father was away on construction jobs, the one I stayed up late helping with science fair projects and watching nervously at school plays. I'd bragged about him to my bridge club, shown off his college graduation photos, and proudly hung his wedding portrait in the hallway. He was the son who used to kiss my forehead and call me his favorite girl. So how could he do this? I decided to wait until he came over for Sunday dinner. It was our tradition, one I held on to tightly. My pot roast in the oven, the table set with my mother's china, and the scent of rosemary and garlic in the air. I had debated canceling altogether, but I needed answers. I deserved them. He arrived with his usual charm, a kiss on the cheek, a bottle of wine in hand, and his phone buzzing in his pocket. But I noticed something different in his eyes, maybe a flicker of guilt, or maybe that was just my hope talking. We made small talk over dinner. I didn't bring it up right away. I waited until we'd cleared the plates and poured the coffee. Then, I looked at him, steady and calm. "Mark," I said, "I found the cameras." He froze. The smile faded from his face, and for a moment, he looked like a boy again caught red-handed sneaking cookies from the jar. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" I interrupted, my voice shaking. "You put surveillance cameras in my home, in my living room, in my kitchen, without a word. Do you understand how that makes me feel?" He sighed, rubbing his hands together, looking down at the table. "I was just trying to keep you safe," he muttered. "You live alone. What if something happened to you and no one knew? Then you ask." I snapped, louder than I intended. "You don't spy on me like I'm some kind of liability." He looked hurt, but I couldn't stop. The dam had broken. I let you into my home. I trusted you. And instead of treating me like a person with dignity, you treated me like a problem too. "Manage, Mom. That's not fair. You've left the stove on a couple times. You slipped on the back steps last winter. I worried. So talk to me," I pleaded. "I may be old, Mark, but I'm not incapable. And even if I were, this isn't the way to handle it." He tried to explain that he thought it was better not to worry me, that he meant no harm, that he planned to tell me eventually. But each excuse only deepened the hurt, because he had made a decision about me without me. He had stolen my right to choose. We sat in silence for a long time. "Do you know what it's like," I finally said, softer now, "to feel like a guest in your own home? To wonder if someone is watching while you nap, or talk to yourself while folding laundry? Do you know how humiliating that is?" He didn't answer, stood up slowly, my hands trembling. "Take them out, Mark. Every last one. Or don't bother coming back." He looked at me, stunned. "You don't mean that?" "Yes," I said. "I do." And I did, because in that moment, I knew I had to draw a line, not just for myself, but for every other elder who's ever been treated like they're less than a whole person. I loved my son, but love without boundaries is not love. It's enabling, and I would no longer enable the erosion of my autonomy. He left without another word. The next day, the cameras were gone. No call, no apology, just silence. But even with the hardware removed, the damage lingered. My trust, my sense of security, my peace, none of those came back with the flip of a switch, and this was only the beginning. I've asked myself that question every night since the cameras were discovered. When did he stop trusting me? It sounds like a simple inquiry, but it's one that cuts deep. Because trust, in a family, is like the invisible thread that holds everything together. When it snaps, you don't just hear it, you feel it. In your bones, in your breath, in your heart. Mark used to trust me with everything. I remember, when he was just a boy, how he'd run to me with every scraped knee, every failed math test, every playground betrayal. He trusted me to kiss away the pain, to hold his secrets safe in my arms. I was his home, his constant, and in return, I trusted him. I believed I was raising a kind, respectful man, one who would grow up to be good not just in the eyes of others, but deep down where it matters most. But somewhere along the way, that trust began to shift. It didn't happen overnight. No, these things rarely do. They unravel in slow motion, like a sweater pulled by a single loose thread. At first, it's barely noticeable. A comment here, a hesitation there. But eventually, you realize the whole thing is coming undone, and you're left shivering in the cold. I think the change began after my husband passed away. Mark and I both took the loss hard. I had been married to Harold for over 50 years. He was my partner, my anchor. And when he died, it felt like the earth had shifted beneath my feet. But I tried to stay strong for the kids. For Mark. He was the one who came around the most during those early months. Fixing things around the house, bringing over groceries, offering to handle the bills just to keep things simple. At first, I was touched. I thought, what a good son I raised. But looking back now, I wonder if that's when the doubts started creeping in. If he looked at me and saw someone too fragile, too vulnerable. I remember a specific afternoon. It was fall, the leaves were just beginning to turn. I had tried to rake the front yard myself. Stubborn as I am, I didn't want help. I liked being useful, but halfway through, I had to sit down. My back just wasn't what it used to be. Mark pulled up just then and saw me on the porch, holding my side and trying to catch my breath. He rushed over, took the rake from my hands, and said, teasing, half serious, "Mom, you really shouldn't be doing this stuff anymore." I laughed. "I'm not made of glass, you know." But he didn't laugh back. Instead, he said, "I know. But it's only a matter of time before something happens." And what then? That moment stuck with me. Not because of what he said, but how he said it. There was something in his tone I couldn't quite name at the time. Worry, yes, but also doubt. Like he no longer believed I could handle things. And from there, the little changes started. He began organizing my medications into weekly trays. He brought me a smart speaker and told me to ask it to call him if I ever fell. He even offered to come with me to doctor appointments, something he had never done before. Each act seemed kind, helpful, but behind it, I began to feel a quiet shift. The sense that my autonomy was slowly being chipped away. Then there was the MAL. I've always handled my own finances, balanced my checkbook with a calculator and pen, like clockwork. But one day, I noticed that some of my bills had been redirected. When I asked Mark about it, he said he was just helping out, setting up autopay so I wouldn't have to worry. But I hadn't asked for that. I hadn't agreed to it. I let it slide. I told myself he was trying to help. But even then, a part of me whispered, he doesn't think you can manage on your own. Maybe that's when the seed was planted. A silent assumption growing in his mind that I was no longer fully capable, not just of raking leaves or paying bills, but of being trusted, fully, as an adult, as a parent. When I finally discovered the cameras, that feeling bloomed into something undeniable, because hidden cameras, they don't say, "I care." They say, "I don't trust you to tell me the truth." They say, "I need to monitor you." Like I was a child, nor worse, a suspect. That's what broke my heart the most. That somewhere, Without saying a word, my son had shifted from protector to warden, from loving child to quiet overseer. I confronted him not long after the discovery, sat him down at the very kitchen table where he used to do his homework. "Mark," I asked, "why didn't you tell me about the cameras?" He looked uncomfortable, guilty even, but not remorseful. "I didn't want to worry you," he said. "It was for your safety." "For my safety," I repeated. "Then why hide them? Why not have a conversation with me, like we always have?" He hesitated. Then, in a voice so calm it chilled me, he said, "Because I knew you'd say no." That was the moment, right there, when I realized he no longer saw me as a partner in my own life. He had decided on his own that I no longer got to make those decisions, and that's the difference between care and control. I'm not ungrateful. I know there are seniors who have no one, who wish their children visited more often, cared more deeply. But caring isn't just about protection, it's about respect, about listening, about involving someone in decisions about their own life. He could have told me about the cameras. We could have had a conversation. Maybe I would have said yes, maybe not, but I deserved the chance to make that call, to be trusted with my own story. I keep going back to that question. When did he stop trusting me? Was it that day on the porch with the rake? Was it the first time I asked him to read the fine print on a bank letter? Was it when I forgot his dog's birthday or missed a medical appointment? Maybe it was gradual, a slow erosion that neither of us saw coming, until one day, he looked at me and saw a problem to solve instead of a person to love. I miss the version of Mark who came to me for advice, who called just to hear my voice, who laughed at my jokes, and trusted my judgment. Now, everything feels filtered, like he's always watching, even when he's not in the room. And I'm not talking about the cameras, I mean emotionally. Like every move I make is silently evaluated, every word I say filed away as proof of whether I'm still capable. That's not love, that's fear disguised as love. I know he thinks he's helping, but help that doesn't listen isn't help, it's control. And I won't live the rest of my life being managed like a project. I want my son back, not the caretaker, not the tech-savvy supervisor, just my boy, the one who trusted me to raise him right, because I did. I raised him to be better than this. And maybe, just maybe, there's still time for him to remember that. I waited 3 days, 3 whole days of pacing around my home, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of untouched coffee, staring out the window without seeing anything. I rehearsed every word I would say, trying to strike that impossible balance between a mother's love and a woman's heartbreak. And every night, I'd lie awake, blinking into the dark, wondering if I'd made some mistake, if I'd misunderstood the situation. Maybe Mark had a reason. A good one. Maybe he was going to tell me soon. Maybe he'd just forgotten. But I knew that wasn't true. The cameras were real. The account was under his name. And the recordings, well, the technicians said they were being backed up somewhere in the cloud. I don't even understand what that means entirely. But I do understand what it feels like to be recorded without your permission. To be watched, observed, like some kind of subject. Like I wasn't a human being anymore, just someone to be managed. So, on the 4th day, I called him. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, my voice trembling more than I liked. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" He replied cheerfully. That almost broke me. That tone, so casual, so normal, like he hadn't done anything at all. I nearly hung up, but I steadied myself. "Can you stop by this evening?" I asked. "Of course. Everything all right?" He asked again. "Just come," I said. "We need to talk." He arrived just after 6, carrying a small bag of groceries, eggs, milk, a frozen casserole he probably picked up on the way. Thoughtful. That's what made this so hard. Mark had always been the thoughtful one, the one who called, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who checked in on me after his father passed away. I almost didn't say anything. I almost sat with him and talked about the weather. But I couldn't pretend anymore. Not after what I knew. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the kitchen table. He did, placing the bag on the counter, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. "Found them, Mark," I said, quietly. He looked puzzled. "Found what?" "The cameras." And just like that, the color drained from his face. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, stunned, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "You what? How did you? Does it matter?" I snapped. My voice cracked. I felt tears coming, but I wouldn't let them fall. "Not yet, Mom. Listen," he started. "No, you listen," I said. raising my voice for the first time. You put cameras in my house. My house. Without asking. Without telling me. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? He tried to speak, but I kept going. Do you know what it's like to walk into your living room and realize someone's been watching you? To wonder how long they've been watching. To not know what moments of your life are private anymore. He rubbed his hands together, nervous, like he was trying to warm them. I was just trying to help, he said, finally. I was worried about you. Worried about what? That I'd fall. That I'd burn the house down with the toaster. Then you talked to me. You helped me like a son, not like a warden. You don't spy on your mother, Mark. I didn't mean it that way, he said. I really didn't then. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. He was quiet. Too quiet. That's what I thought, I said. You didn't tell me because you knew it was wrong. You knew I wouldn't agree. I didn't think you'd understand, he mumbled. I stared at him. You didn't think I'd understand. So instead, you took away my right to choose. Silence. You've always been independent, Mom, he said finally. But you're older now. Things can happen. And I live across town. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. Then, be present. Visit, call. Don't install surveillance equipment like I'm some kind of liability. He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. You are getting older, he said, and there was something sharp in his tone. You forget things. You left the stove on last month. You lost your car keys in the fridge. It's not just about safety, it's about preparing, in case something happens. I felt my heart harden, and this is how you prepare. By deciding for me that I no longer deserve privacy. He looked away. I was going to tell you, he said, double quotes. No, you weren't, I said. You were going to keep watching. You were going to keep pretending everything was fine while treating me like a child who couldn't be trusted alone. Mom, I didn't know how else to help. I stood up. You ask. That's how you help. You talk to me. You respect me. You treat me like the woman who raised you, not like a case file to be monitored. He didn't say anything. And what were you watching, Mark? Me folding laundry, cooking dinner, sleeping. Do you even know how disturbing that is? I set the motion alerts, he said. Only if there was activity at odd hours. And you think that makes it better? I asked. He sighed, defeated. I just didn't want to lose you. You're going to lose me anyway, if this is how you treat me, I said, softly. That hit him. I saw it in his eyes. Mom, I raised you better than this. You know better. He nodded, slowly. I'll take them out, all of them, today. Good, I said, but that won't fix everything. I know, he whispered. We sat in silence for a long time. You were my golden boy, Mark, I said, finally. The one I thought would always have my back. You broke something. I don't know if it can be unbroken. I'm sorry, he said, tears in his eyes, and for the first time, I believed him. But I also knew this was just the beginning of a long, hard road back to trust. Because even when you forgive, the hurt doesn't vanish overnight. And sometimes, knowing someone you love crossed a Lanini line is enough to change everything. I wish I could say that once Mark explained himself, once the confrontation was out of the way, that things returned to normal, but they didn't, not even close. If anything, that conversation opened a wound I didn't even realize was festering, and like most wounds left untreated, it began to ache more with time, not less. For weeks after the confrontation, I found myself unable to sleep through the night. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum from the fridge or chirp from outside, made me jump. I used to love the quiet stillness of nighttime sipping chamomile tea, reading a chapter from my favorite mystery novel, listening to the wind rustle the trees outside. But now, the silence felt threatening. Was someone watching me through one of those cameras? Were they still active? Had Mark told me the truth about deactivating them? I remember one particular night vividly. I was tossing and turning, unable to shake the feeling that eyes were on me. So I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and checked every single room. The den, the kitchen, the hallway, even the bathroom. I must have looked like a mad woman, waving the light around like a detective in her own home. But that was what I'd been reduced to: suspicion, fear, and a constant sense of being unsafe in the one place that was supposed to protect me. I began to speak less with my friends. I stopped going to church luncheons and bridge night, not because I was ashamed, though maybe I was, a little, but because I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want the pity in their eyes. I didn't want to hear, "Oh, I'm sure he meant well," or worse, at least he cares enough to watch over you. That wasn't care. That was control. And then came the tears. Quiet, unannounced, often in the middle of simple tasks. I'd be folding laundry, and suddenly tears would spill down my cheeks. I wasn't even thinking of anything specific, just an overwhelming wave of sadness that would crash over me without warning. It felt like mourning, but not for a person. I was mourning trust, privacy, independence. My world felt smaller. My home, which had once been a sanctuary, now felt like a stage where I wasn't sure if the curtains had ever really closed. Mark would call, but I kept our conversations brief. I couldn't bring myself to speak freely with him anymore. There was a wall between us, made not of stone or steel, but of hurt, and that wall wasn't coming down anytime soon. Some nights, I thought about packing a suitcase and leaving. Where would I go? I had no answers, but the mere idea of escaping my own home because of my own child, that hurt more than I can say. I started journaling. It gave me something to do when I couldn't sleep. And those pages were the only place I could speak freely. I wrote about the betrayal, the confusion, the anger, the disappointment. I wrote letters to my husband, asking what he would have done. I cried onto those pages more than once. They say time heals, and maybe that's true. But no one tells you how slowly it moves when you're living each minute under the weight of sorrow. Still, I held on to a thread of strength, because if there's one thing life has taught me, it's that, even in our darkest moments, we can still choose how we respond. I hadn't lost everything, not yet, but I had to decide whether I was going to let this define me. That's when I started planning what to do next. When I finally gathered enough courage to disable the cameras and confront Mark, something shifted inside me. I felt like I had crossed an invisible line from being the watched to being the watcher of my own life again. But even after removing the devices, the feeling of being invaded didn't disappear overnight. It lingered like a shadow in every corner of my house. I started by walking through each room, this time slowly, intentionally. I opened every cupboard, checked every shelf, and stood quietly in each doorway. I needed to remind myself that this was my space. I needed to reclaim the comfort that had been stolen. But it wasn't easy. After all, these weren't just walls and furniture. This was my life, my memories, and they had been trespassed. The first thing I did was call in a local locksmith. I had all the locks changed, even the one on the back door that had been sticking. For years, I told myself it was a practical measure, but it was more than that. It was symbolic. It was a way of resetting boundaries. The locksmith, a kind young man named Trevor, didn't ask too many questions, but when he saw the strain in my eyes, he offered to reinforce the front door. I accepted. Then, I took down all the curtains and washed them. I vacuumed every room, dusted off photo frames, and scrubbed the kitchen tiles like I was trying to erase a bad dream. It was the most thorough cleaning I had done in years, not because the house needed it, but because I did. I needed to reclaim not just my space, but my sense of control. A few days later, I reached out to my church group. I hadn't been to a meeting in months, but when I arrived, the familiar faces welcomed me with warm hugs and soft eyes. They didn't pry, they didn't judge, they just let me be. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I told them, gently, about what had happened, about the cameras, about Mark, about the fear I didn't even know I had been living with until it was gone. One woman, Martha, squeezed my hand and said, "It's your house, Margaret. Don't let anyone make you feel like a guest in it." That stayed with me. Inspired by their support, I decided to make a few changes in my home. Not just repairs, but declarations. I bought a new armchair in a soft blue color. I rearranged the living room furniture to face the window, where the sunlight pours in during the late afternoon. I planted new flowers in the front yard. Lily, my favorite tans, started leaving the porch light on at night. A little beacon to remind myself that this home was filled with light and love, not fear. I even invited my grandchildren over for a sleepover, something I hadn't done since the camera incident. We played board games, made popcorn, and they helped me bake brownies in the kitchen. The house was filled with laughter again. The sound of it reminded me of the days before technology crept into every corner of our lives. It wasn't all easy. There were days when I still glanced over my shoulder, nights when I lay awake wondering how long Mark had been watching, and why he hadn't just asked me if I needed help. But those feelings began to fade as I continued taking small steps to regain my peace. One day, I took a trip to the community center and attended a seminar on privacy and elder rights. I sat in the back, listening to others who had gone through similar experiences, people who had been taken advantage of, manipulated, or dismissed. I wasn't alone. That was perhaps the most powerful realization of all. I wasn't alone. I left that seminar with a folder full of information and a fire in my chest. I contacted a legal aid group and spoke to an attorney about setting clear boundaries in my will and powers of attorney. I made sure that no one, not even my children, could override my decisions without going through the proper channels. It was hard, but it was necessary. Through all of this, I didn't cut Mark off completely. I told him how I felt. I told him how deeply he had hurt me. He cried. He apologized. He said he thought he was doing the right thing, but even he couldn't explain why he didn't talk to me first. I thought you'd say no, he admitted, and maybe I would have. But that was my right. I told him that trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, that our relationship could heal, but only if he respected my space, my choices, and my right to live independently. He said he understood. We still talk, less often, but more honestly. And I think, in time, we might find our way back to each other. But I won't forget what happened, and I won't let it define me. My home is mine again, not because I forced it to be, but because I chose to make it so. I took every fearful thought, every uncertain moment, and I turned them into action. I made my home a place of peace again on my own terms. This part of my story isn't just about reclaiming space, it's about reclaiming self-respect, voice, and confidence. And if you're out there listening, if something like this has happened to you, I want you to know, you can reclaim your space, too. You deserve to. There comes a time in every woman's life, no matter her age, when she has to decide what she will no longer tolerate. For me, that moment came on a crisp Friday morning, just a week after discovering the cameras. I'd spent sleepless nights, silent meals, and restless days walking from room to room like a guest in my own home. My house, my sanctuary, had become a surveillance zone. I couldn't take it anymore. I woke up that morning with a determination I hadn't felt in years. It was like something inside me had snapped into place. I remember looking in the mirror, brushing back my silver hair, and telling myself, enough. That single word carried decades of maternal sacrifice, trust, and pain. I was done being monitored like a child. If Mark wanted to treat me like someone who needed watching, then I was going to show him exactly how strong and capable I still was. First, I unplugged the internet router. Simple as that. One tug and the cameras were offline. I could almost feel the house exhale, like it was relieved. The silence was different. No hum of data being uploaded, no blinking lights. Just the quiet comfort I used to know. Then I picked up the phone and called the local locksmith. I changed every lock in the house, even the one on the garage. Mark had a spare key, of course, but I was done letting him come and go as he pleased. If he wanted to visit, he could knock. The third step was harder. I called Mark. Mom. He answered casually, as if everything was normal. We need to talk, I said. My voice didn't shake, even though my hands did. Come by this afternoon. I'll be here. When he arrived, I was waiting in the living room, just like always, but this time, I was the one with the upper hand. I know about the cameras, I said flatly. All 5 of them. He didn't deny it. Not even a flicker of shame. It was for your safety, he said. You live alone. You could fall. And I raised my hand. Don't insult my intelligence. You did it, without telling me. You watched me, without my consent. He tried to argue, to paint himself as the loving son, just trying to help, but I wasn't having it. You don't get to redefine love, Mark, I said. Love includes respect, trust, boundaries. What you did was a violation. It was controlling. And it ends now. He sat there in stunned silence. Maybe he expected me to cry, to plead, to be grateful, but I was done being passive. I handed him a small box with all 5 cameras inside. Take these, and don't ever bring them back. He looked at me, maybe for the first time in years, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes: confusion, guilt, maybe even fear. Fear that I was slipping away from his control. But I wasn't slipping, I was standing. Taking back my privacy didn't just mean removing cameras or changing locks. It meant reclaiming my voice, my autonomy, my right to live as I choose. After Mark left that day, I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the porch. The wind was cool, the trees whispering secrets only old women know. And for the first time in a week, I breathed deeply, fully. I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't the end. Families are messy. Love can get twisted. But I also knew that I had set a boundary that would shape the rest of my life. Privacy isn't just a right, it's a form of dignity. And at 78 years old, I wasn't about to surrender mine. I was no longer a woman being watched. I was a woman who watched back, who saw the truth, and who refused to be silent. And that, I think, is the bravest thing I've ever done. It was 3 days after I had all the cameras taken down when I got a knock at the door. It was early afternoon. The light outside was sharp and golden, the kind that filters in through the front window and dances on the wood floor like it's trying to remind you life goes on. I wasn't expecting anyone. Sally had already brought over groceries the day before, and I hadn't called anyone. I thought maybe it was a neighbor or someone from church. But when I opened the door, there stood Mark. He wasn't carrying anything, not flowers, not a pie, not even that sheepish smile he used to give me when he broke the screen door as a boy. Just his tall frame, looking a little thinner than I remembered, hands in his pockets, and eyes darting behind me, like he was checking for damage. I stared at him. I didn't say a word at first, just looked. Sometimes silence says more than screaming ever could. "Mom," he said, voice lower than usual. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. Barely. I didn't want a scene on the porch. Not with the Johnsons next door doing yard work, and probably already eavesdropping. He stepped past me, looking around like he expected something to be different, and it was. The house didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt exposed. And he was the reason. He sat on the couch, and I remained standing. "You look well," he said, trying to fill the silence. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." "I didn't," I replied. That landed hard. I saw the flicker in his face, the momentary wince, but I didn't take it back. I was tired of smoothing things over, tired of excusing behavior just because it came from family. The truth was, I hadn't decided whether I wanted to see him again at all. But I also knew I couldn't live the rest of my life with this knot in my stomach. "I came to apologize," he said, after a long pause. "I didn't mean to scare you." I looked at him, just looked, let the weight of that weak statement hang in the air. "You didn't mean to scare me," I repeated, carefully. "Mark, you put cameras in my home without telling me. You watched me. Ate dinner with your family while watching your mother like I was some kind of liability." "It wasn't like that," he said quickly. It was for your safety." "Was it?" I asked. "Because last I checked, people who care about someone's safety usually start with a conversation. Not by violating every ounce of trust that person had." His shoulders slumped. He rubbed his hands together like he was trying to warm them. "It was 72 degrees in the house. I panicked," he said finally. "After Dad died. And then the fall you had in the kitchen. I just kept thinking, what if something happens and I'm not there? What if you lie there for hours?" "I thought the cameras would help." "They helped no one," I snapped. "They stripped me of my dignity. Do you know how many nights I sat here, wondering what else you'd been watching? If you saw me cry, if you listened when I talked to myself." "It wasn't just a mistake, Mark. It was a betrayal." He looked down at the floor. "I didn't think of it that way," he admitted. "No," I said. "You didn't, because you didn't think about me at all, just your own fear." We were quiet for a while. The grandfather clock ticked behind me, the sound filling the silence like a metronome for broken hearts. I didn't know what I expected from him. Tears, maybe, a real apology, something that would help me stitch the wound back together. What I got was, "Not that, I just want to make it right," he said finally. "Whatever I need to do. Start by never doing anything like this again," I said. "Not to me, not to your sisters, not to anyone." He nodded. "I won't, and don't expect me to just pretend this never happened," I added. "I may forgive you someday, Mark. But trust, that has to be earned again." "I understand." He stood to leave then, hesitated by the door. "I love you, Mom," he said. "I know," I replied, "but sometimes love isn't enough." He left, and I didn't cry. Not until I saw his car pull away. Then I sat in the kitchen and let the tears come. Not because of the cameras, not even because of the betrayal, but because that golden boy had turned into someone I didn't recognize. And now, I had to grieve a kind of loss I never saw coming. He had said he was sorry, and maybe, in his own way, he was, but it wasn't the kind of apology that rebuilds bridges. It was the kind that acknowledges the damage, but doesn't offer bricks to start again. Still, it was a beginning. And in this strange, late chapter of my life, I've learned that sometimes a cracked door is better than a slammed one, even if the air coming through is cold. In the weeks that followed, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a walk around the neighborhood, no purse, no phone, no destination, just me, the breeze, and the sound of my own footsteps. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. It was a simple walk, the kind I used to take when my kids were little, when I'd push a stroller and wave to neighbors. But this time, I wasn't walking to get anywhere. I was walking because I could, because no one was watching, because I had taken something precious back, my autonomy. I came home, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. I watched the sun dip low behind the fence line, and I thought about everything that had happened. What do we do when the people we love the most hurt us in ways we never imagined? When protection feels like a prison? When love forgets to ask for permission? We reclaim our voice, even if it trembles. We speak up not just for ourselves, but for every parent, grandparent, and elder who has been made to feel invisible under the guise of help. We remind the world that getting older doesn't mean surrendering who we are. My name is Margaret. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a woman who learned that trust, once broken, may never come back the same, but self-respect, that's mine, to guard. If you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, if someone has made decisions about your life without you, please know this. You are not alone. You have every right to be heard, to be seen, to be treated with dignity, no matter your age. This was my story. I hope it helped someone else tell theirs. Thank you, dear, for listening to my story all the way to the end. If this touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you love or even yourself, please take a moment to click that little thumbs up button. It means more than you know. And if you'd like to hear more stories like mine, from a grandma who's been through a few storms and still knows how to brew a strong pot of tea, go ahead and subscribe. I'd love to have you here in our little corner of warmth and truth. Lastly, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Has anything like this ever happened to someone you know? Or maybe you just want to say hello. I'll be reading them all, promise.